Paul is not asking anything new of the church in Philippi, rather he's simply asking them to continue in his absence with the same pattern of behavior that they displayed while he was there with him. To work out your salvation does not mean to do good works to receive salvation. Rather, it means both to reflect and put into practice one's salvation. It's directed at the church rather than as individuals. And he's calling them to think, well, we are saved. What does that mean in terms of our conduct? And this is to be done with fear and trembling. This is the language the Old Testament uses for the awe, the reverence that one should display in the presence of God. Philosophers have long debated the relationship between human effort and God's will and God's action. But this is not Paul's preoccupation here. He's dealing with something much simpler in a certain sense, because if we are to follow the example of Jesus and have this self-sacrificial servanthood which takes the interests of others into consideration, we need both to be transformed in the way that we desire, and also we need to be given the power to do this. And Paul is promising the church in Philippi that God will work on them, both in the sense of giving them the will to desire God's will, and in giving them the power to put it into practice. In describing how the church is to put this into practice, Paul evokes the image of the nation of Israel in the desert. The church in Philippi are to work God and do God's will without grumbling, without complaining. And this echoes the actions of the people of Israel in the desert, their constant complaints against Moses, against God for all the difficulties, circumstances that they were facing, the lack of gratitude for the deliverance in the Exodus. And this is a negative foil for what Paul expects at the church in Philippi. The very Greek word he uses for gonguzman, kind of even the sound evokes this constant repetitive complaining, and that they should stay away from. And if they do that, they will fulfill what God had expected or hoped for from the people of Israel as he took them out of Israel. They will be blameless and pure. They will be children of God without fault. This does not mean that they will have reached a state of sinless perfection. But what it does mean is that they will fulfill God's calling for them in such a way that when it comes to the day of judgment, no one can find fault in a witness and a testimony they gave of God. As the church in Philippi obey God without groaning or arguing, they're told that they will shine like the stars in heaven. And here Paul is evoking a language of Daniel chapter 12, when the righteous are promised that they will be raised from the dead and will shine like the stars in the sky. And here the idea is that having died in Christ and been raised to new life as part of the new creation, albeit even living still within mortal bodies in the old creation, we Christians are still able to partially experience this and shine the light of Jesus in the crooked and wicked generation that surrounds us, as the Church of Promise, as they hold on to the word of life. While this may be a reference to the Old Testament scriptures, the focus on Jesus in this chapter suggests that Paul is probably referring to the gospel proclaimed about Jesus. The faithfulness of the church in Philippi will lead Paul to gladness and joy, which he then invites the church itself to celebrate in, because it becomes evidence that Paul's efforts in the gospel were not in vain. It's quite interesting how he, in very few words, actually blends three different metaphors. One comes from the world of athletics, ancient athletics, where winning the prize at the end is a cause for boasting, for celebration. And Paul is saying, well, if at the end the Philippians are faithful, he will have cause for celebration. From the world of labor, where a worker might celebrate, boast it when the object that he is making is complete. And Paul is saying the faithfulness of the Philippians is one that will confirm that his work was successful. He then joins the idea of the ancient world of sacrifices, where a drink might be poured out over a sacrifice as an offering. And it's as if the two things will come together, the faithfulness of the Philippians and then the life of Paul poured as a drink. Maybe a reference to his sufferings, possibly a reference to his death. It's open what that might mean, but these two things come together as a cause of gladness and joy.